Evidence-based approach to surgery. Surgeons must be able to understand the evidence-based medicine process in order to identify, access, apply, and integrate new knowledge into their clinical practice and provide high-quality care for their patients. In practice, evidence-based medicine involves the following three fundamental principles. Point 2. First, the ability to make optimal clinical decisions requires awareness of the best available research evidence. Second, there must be standards by which to judge whether evidence can be trusted. Third, the quality of evidence for benefit must be weighed against the risks, burdens, and costs associated with alternative management strategies, while simultaneously considering individual patients' predicaments, values, and preferences. This evidence-based approach to clinical practice can also be remembered by the 5 A's: ask, acquire, appraise, apply, and assess. Fig. 8.1.3. These 5 steps provide a model for practicing evidence-based medicine that all clinicians are encouraged to use when questions arise during the routine care of patients. In everyday surgical practice, the evidence-based medicine process often starts when a surgeon learns about a new procedure or technique that could be used to treat a condition managed by their surgical specialty. The next step is to determine whether any research studies provide evidence that support the efficacy and effectiveness of that new procedure. For a study to provide a high level of evidence, it needs to address a significant clinical problem and provide novel results, extend what was previously known, or describe an innovative procedure that represents an improvement over existing technique. The study should include patients who are likely to be offered the intervention in everyday surgical practice. Moreover, it should focus on surgical treatments or strategies that can be replicated in a real-world clinical setting. Evaluating research study questions. There are several strategies that surgeons can use to review the literature, evaluate research study questions, and determine whether scientific evidence should be applied to their clinical practice. One strategy for evaluating the implications of a research question is outlined by the mnemonic FINER: feasible, interesting, novel, ethical, and relevant. Point 4. FINER provides a framework that prompts the reader to ask several important questions when considering a research study. Is the study feasible and adequately powered to answer the specific research question? Does the study address a topic that is interesting to the surgical community? Is the research novel or innovative? And does the study meet all ethical standards of research conduct? Finally, do the results from the study change surgical practice or policy, and do they merit further scientific research or evidence? Another widely accepted approach to developing and accessing a research question is the PICOT framework: population, intervention, comparison, outcome, and time. Table 8.1.5. PICOT is a structured way to summarize the main components of a research question and can also be used to appraise a study or interpret its results. Point 4. For example, a surgeon evaluating a surgical outcome study would be prompted to ask, P. Is the study population or clinical problem comparable with surgical patients or issues that I deal with in routine clinical practice? I. Is the intervention truly novel, and does it represent an improvement over current standards of care? C. Are study comparators valid and representative of usual care? O. Are outcome measures valid and reliable? And T. Does the duration of treatment and follow-up correspond to the duration important to patients? Using the PICOT framework to ask these questions provides a systematic process for determining whether studies are valid and relevant to clinical practice. Study design. There are many study designs used to undertake surgical research, including both experimental and observational designs. Fig. 8.2. The specific study design used to generate evidence is often influenced by practical considerations, such as resource availability and feasibility. Nonetheless, the study design selected to evaluate surgical interventions will largely determine our levels of confidence about cause and effect. Several criteria have been proposed to establish epidemiological evidence of causal relationships, including the set of 9 criteria originally published by Sir Bradford Hill in 1965.6, distilled down to the most simplistic terms. Causal relationships exist when 1. The cause precedes the effect, 2. The cause was related to the effect, and 3. We can find no other plausible explanation for the effect other than the proposed cause. Point 7. Experimental studies that are prospective and randomized usually provide the greatest assurance that these criteria are met and are associated with the highest levels of evidence. But even prospective randomized studies can lead to erroneous conclusions if they are not executed or analyzed properly. Evaluating the quality of clinical evidence requires a close look at the strengths and limitations of each type of study design. Table 8.2. Randomized controlled trials. When appropriately designed and conducted, randomized controlled trials, RCTs, are considered the gold standard for evaluating most types of healthcare interventions. In the study design, patients are randomly allocated to either a treatment or a control group prior to receiving an intervention using an element of chance to determine the assignments, similar to tossing a coin. After randomization, patients are followed in exactly the same way, and the only difference is the treatment group they were allocated to. The RCT study design has the greatest potential for determining causation between exposure and outcome, given that randomization balances both known and unknown prognostic factors, i.e., measured and unmeasured confounders, between comparison groups during the assignment of treatment. As such, the effect of the treatment on outcomes relative to the control group can be determined while other variables are kept constant and selection bias is minimized. Furthermore, randomization can facilitate blinding, also known as masking, of the identity of treatments from investigators, participants, and assessors. RCTs can be used to compare nearly all types of interventions used in surgical patients. This includes surgical procedures, medications used before or after surgery, screening programs, or diagnostic modalities, to name a few. But while RCTs help us determine the presence and strength of a causal relationship between different surgical interventions in a given outcome, they also have several weaknesses. First, they are very expensive to complete, and it can take many years to obtain results when large sample sizes are needed. Second, the results may not be generalizable to patients in everyday practice due to narrow enrollment criteria. Third, many surgical interventions are simply not amenable to randomization. Finally, RCTs can still yield biased results if the study is not well designed or executed properly and lacks methodological rigor. To assess whether RCT findings are valid, surgeons need complete and transparent information on the methodology and results. This need for adequate RCT reporting fueled the development of the original Consolidated Standards of Reporting Trials (CONSORT) statement in 1996 and its subsequent revision in 2010.8.9. The most recent CONSORT statement includes a 25-item checklist and flow diagram, which provides guidance for reporting all types of RCTs but focuses on the most common two parallel group design type. This checklist provides an easy way for surgeons to evaluate the quality of evidence derived from these types of studies. Cross-sectional study. A cross-sectional study involves looking at research subjects who differ on one key characteristic at a specific point in time. Exposure and outcome data are collected at the same time point among subjects who are similar in most other characteristics but different in a key factor of interest. For example, this could involve patients undergoing a specific type of surgery who come from different age groups, income levels, or geographic locations. Cross-sectional studies are commonly used to describe disease prevalence or characteristics that exist in a community or hospital setting. This study design is inexpensive and is often used to make inferences about possible relationships or to gather preliminary data to support further research and experimentation, i.e., hypothesis generating. However, these studies are limited by survival bias and cannot analyze associations over a longitudinal period of time or be used to determine cause and effect relationships between exposure and outcome variables. Furthermore, there may be a sampling bias if the timing of the cross-sectional study leads to a sample that is not representative of patients in the general population. Case control study. The case control design uses a different sampling strategy in which the investigators identify a group of individuals who exhibit a specific outcome, i.e., the cases, and then compare this group to a set of individuals who do not exhibit the outcome of interest, i.e., the controls. The cases and controls are then compared with respect to the frequency of one or more past exposures. If the cases have substantially higher odds of exposure to a particular factor compared to the control subjects, it suggests an association but does not necessarily provide evidence of causal inference. There are numerous strengths of case control studies. This study design allows investigators to examine risk factors associated with outcomes that are uncommon, to examine the association of multiple risk factors with outcomes simultaneously, and to examine outcomes that occur a long period of time after the exposure occurs. They are also relatively inexpensive to complete and can help generate hypotheses. On balance, however, case control studies are limited by their retrospectively design that allows the potential for recall and selection bias. Moreover, identifying valid control groups to compare to cases can be difficult. Estimating the frequency of exposure in the population at large is often inaccurate, and the design allows evaluation of only one outcome at a time. Cohort study. A cohort study is an observational study design in which groups of subjects are identified based on their exposure to a particular risk factor and then compared to a group that have not been exposed to that same factor. This study design can be conducted from either a forward-looking, i.e., prospective, or backward-looking, i.e., retrospective, viewpoint. Prospective cohort studies are planned in advance and carried out over a period of time to assess outcome incidence among exposure groups. In comparison, retrospective cohort studies look at data that already exist and attempt to identify risk factors for outcomes that have already occurred. Retrospective analyses of existing surgical databases, in particular, constitute one of the most common applications of the study design. 10 For both types of cohort studies, a higher incidence of outcomes in the exposed group suggests an association between that factor and the outcome. However, because prospective studies collect information about exposures and outcomes purposefully and systematically, they provide stronger evidence for causation. There are several strengths and limitations of cohort studies. The advantages of cohort studies are that they are easier and less expensive to conduct than RCTs, the incidence, or rate, of exposure and outcomes can be estimated, and subjects in cohorts can be matched to limit the influence of confounding variables. In addition, enrollment criteria and outcome measures can be standardized, and, unlike case control studies, multiple simultaneous outcome assessment is possible. However, cohort studies also have several disadvantages. Because there is no randomization, one cannot account for unmeasured imbalances in patient characteristics. Blinding or masking is difficult, or impossible retrospectively, and outcomes of interest can take a long time to occur, requiring many years of information about exposures. For retrospective studies in particular, treatment selection bias and confounding variables may lead to unmeasured differences in exposure groups over time that cannot be controlled for with statistical analysis. Moreover, interpretations can be limited because of missing data that is impossible for researchers go back in time to collect. In order to assess the evidence quality derived from different types of cohort studies, several simplified checklist methods have been developed. The Strengthening the Reporting of Observational Studies in Epidemiology (STROE) statement is one of these checklists that provides an organized system for assessing observational study methodology and results that is similar to the consort system used for RCTs. 11 STROE provides guidance on how to report critical components of research studies from all types of observational study designs, including cohort, case control, and cross-sectional study designs. As part of a series of articles on research methods published in a special issue of JAMA Surgery in 2018, another checklist was proposed for evaluating the quality of evidence derived from databases commonly used in surgical outcomes research. 10 This checklist consists of 10 items for review that can be used when evaluating the findings of retrospective cohort studies, or considering questions that might be reasonably addressed using these databases. In the same issue of JAMA Surgery, in-depth information was provided for 13 of the most popular surgical databases, including the National Inpatient Sample, Surveillance, Epidemiology, and End Results, SEER, Program 12, Medicare Claims 13, National Surgical Quality Improvement Program, NSQIP, 14, Society of Vascular Surgery Vascular Quality Initiative, SVSVQI, 15, and the Society of Thoracic Surgeons, STS, National Database. 16. Case series and reports. Historically, the surgical literature has relied upon case series and case reports to describe surgical interventions and patient outcomes. These have been the most highly cited type of study design in the surgical literature until the past couple of decades. 17 Observations are made on a series of individuals, usually all receiving the same surgical intervention, but with no control group. The sampling of a case series is based on either exposure or outcomes, but not both. For example, a series could include all patients who underwent surgery at a single institution over a decade, or a case report might describe patients who experienced some rare adverse event after surgery. The strength of case series and reports lie in their ability to provide in-depth narrative information on a given topic when other study designs cannot be carried out. This in turn may help to generate new hypotheses. However, the main limitation of this study design is the lack of ability to generalize findings or to establish a cause and effect relationship between exposures and outcomes. Case series and reports cannot be comparative and no absolute risk nor relative effect measures for an outcome can be calculated. As such, studies with these designs are nearly always considered low-quality evidence. Synthetic and systematic outcome studies meta-analyses. One of the highest forms of evidence quality comes from a meta-analysis, where the results from multiple studies on the same topic are combined. This includes data generated from either experimental or observational study designs. Fig. 8.2. The basic tenet behind meta-analysis is that there is an underlying true association between an exposure and outcome variable assessed within similar studies, but which has been measured with a certain degree of error within each individual study. By combining similar outcome studies and using statistics to derive a pooled estimate, meta-analysis can improve the precision and accuracy of this estimate and have the statistical power to detect the true association. Furthermore, meta-analyses allow study results to be generalized to larger populations, permit inconsistency of results between studies to be quantified and analyzed, and identify the presence of publication bias between similar studies. 18 However, there are several factors that can limit the quality of evidence derived from meta-analyses. 19 Often, studies examining a specific topic do not have comparable patient populations, endpoints, or exposure groups. Excess variation or heterogeneity in exposure or outcome variables between individual studies beyond what chance alone would predict indicates that the results of the studies are not compatible and should not be pooled. This is a particular concern when aggregating results from observational studies where selection bias and confounding may have affected the original analysis. Moreover, the evidence derived from a meta-analysis is only as good as the methodology of the studies that are included. Even a well-designed meta-analysis cannot correct for poor study design or intrinsic bias that was present when the included studies were originally designed or analyzed. Cost-effectiveness analysis. A cost-effectiveness analysis is an economic evaluation that simultaneously measures the outcomes and costs of alternatives. Interventions. This type of research evidence has become increasingly prevalent in the surgical literature as health policy has increasingly focused on containing surgical costs and defining high-value care. Cost-effectiveness refers to analyses that directly compare the costs of one intervention with some other alternative intervention relative to the difference in clinical benefit. This ratio of differential costs to differential benefits is known as an incremental cost-effectiveness ratio, ICER. 0.20. The ICER is calculated by taking the ratio of the incremental cost, the difference in cost between two strategies, and the incremental effectiveness, the difference in outcomes between two strategies. For example, if intervention A is both more costly and more effective than intervention B, the ICER conveys how much it would cost to produce the incremental increase in effectiveness achieved by choosing intervention A over intervention B. Effectiveness outcomes in cost-effectiveness studies are often assessed using the Quality-Adjusted Life Years (QALYs) metric, which measures both the quantity and quality of life. 21. The QALY is constructed by weighing the amount of time spent in a health state by the quality of life in that health state. QALYs have been used extensively in surgical outcome studies to assess different disease states, and healthcare strategies that cost less than $100,000 per QALY are generally considered to be cost-effective by current accepted standards. 22. For example, in one study, the ICER for coronary artery bypass surgery versus percutaneous coronary intervention for coronary artery disease was calculated to be about $30,000 per QALY gain. 23. As such, coronary artery bypass surgery is deemed by this evidence to be more cost-effective than percutaneous coronary intervention for coronary artery disease. Studies that use a general measure of benefit that considers the qualitative value of health, e.g., QALY, are typically referred to as cost-utility analyses. Cost-effectiveness and cost-utility studies can help surgeons make clinical decisions by presenting cost and outcome trade-offs between competing interventions. These trade-offs can be simulated over time under different conditions using Markov models that incorporate estimates of risk of adverse events and probability of desired outcomes, such as cure, improved function, or longevity. Markov models assume that a patient is always in one of a finite number of discrete health states, each with a specified value and/or cost, and can transition from one health state to another over time based on known or estimated probabilities of events. By modeling the time dependence of probabilities for entering several different health states and outcomes, Markov models allow for many different scenarios to be estimated for any given clinical decision and are thus a valuable and versatile method for modeling the trade-offs between competing strategies. Systematic reviews beyond aggregation of data within meta-analyses. Systematic reviews of outcomes research are another important means used to synthesize and organize bodies of surgical evidence. 18. Systematic reviews start with a question or hypothesis and involve a systematic search of the surgical literature using explicit criteria for selecting studies to answer the research question. This typically begins by developing a comprehensive and detailed search strategy, a priori, that can be used to identify, exclude, evaluate, and synthesize results from all relevant studies on a given topic. Once a search strategy is developed, it can be executed using several online databases including Medline, United States Library of Medicine Database, EMBASE, Medical and Pharmacologic Database by Elsevier Publishing, CINAHL, Cumulative Index to Nursing and Allied Health Literature, and the Cochrane Collaborative. In comparison to informal or narrative reviews of the literature, the methods used by systematic reviews for evaluating studies and extracting information from them are rigorous and intended to reduce the potential for subjectivity or bias in the findings. Furthermore, systematic reviews are reported in a manner that is conducive to replication of both methodology and findings. Well-conducted systematic reviews can be an invaluable resource for surgeons given the large volume of published studies each year on any given surgical topic. They can identify high-quality evidence within the literature and help define the exact knowledge base on any given subject. The Cochrane Collaboration Library, https://www.cochrane.com/cdsr/reviews, in particular, provides a large database of systematic reviews on a wide range of topics that impact surgical patients. By critically examining individual research studies, systematic reviews can help identify inconsistencies among different sources of evidence. Finally, these types of studies also help inform whether research findings can be applied to specific subgroups of surgical patients. For example, systematic reviews have been useful for defining the types of high-risk surgical patients who benefit most from perioperative beta blockers and those that have increased risk of adverse side effects from these medications during the postoperative period. 24. Qualitative data analysis. Another important form of surgical research evidence is derived from qualitative data analyses. Qualitative data, also known as descriptive data, is non-numerical empirical information collected by researchers to describe concepts, opinions, or interpretations of a specific topic. These data are typically captured from interviews, focus groups, document analysis, or notes taken during an observation. Analyzing these forms of qualitative data can reveal consistent patterns or themes among patients, providers, or other research subjects. These analyses may generate hypotheses that can be further tested with quantitative methods or, alternatively, help researchers drill down to better understand the findings from quantitative outcome studies. There are several different methodologies commonly used to conduct qualitative data analyses, including phenomenology, content analysis, grounded theory, and ethnography. 25 The goal of phenomenology is to study how individuals derive meaning from their life experiences by understanding how they perceive a specific phenomenon. For example, the long-term quality of life among patients who had undergone primary leg amputation for trauma could be studied this way. Content analysis is another method whereby documents such as interview or focus group transcripts are analyzed to determine frequencies and patterns of words in the textual data. Based on how materials are categorized, researchers are able to make inferences about common messages or themes within the text. In comparison, grounded theory methods are used to collect descriptive data when researchers want to develop new theories about how processes occur. Finally, ethnography is used to understand the norms, values, and social structures of groups, primarily through observation combined with focused interviews of participants. The need for these types of qualitative research methods in surgery is recognized because they provide a deeper and more detailed understanding of the social and environmental contexts underlying surgical outcomes. 26 The strength of qualitative data analyses rests in their ability to shed light on phenomena that would be nearly impossible to study using quantitative methods alone. For example, grounded theory and ethnography methods have been used to understand operating room workflow or communications among surgical teams practicing in high-volume versus low-volume hospitals and to generate theories surrounding how information is exchanged between surgical and primary care teams during transitions of surgical care. 27 The opinions and experiences of surgeons, nurses, or trainees were solicited using these methods along with the ability to directly observe care processes as well as the technology used during communication. Alternatively, content analysis has been used to explore psychosocial issues related to surgery from patient focus groups, including reasons underlying satisfaction with care or problems that patients perceive as impeding high-quality care during episodes of surgical care. 28 These different types of qualitative methods can also be combined with quantitative approaches in what is known as mixed methods research. 29 Mixed methods research involves collecting and analyzing both qualitative and quantitative data within the same study. Rather than focus on just one approach, Mixed methods allows investigators to define a specific research problem and then use a combination of methodologies in order to elucidate the relevant issues in a broader and more detailed fashion. For example, a recent mixed methods research study looking at provider compliance with surgical safety checklists first analyzed provider usage of a checklist within an institution, i.e., qualitative analysis, and then interviewed providers to explore and contextualize the specific reasons for their checklist use as opposed to non-compliance, i.e., quantitative analysis. 30.